What's up everybody? Welcome back to the Paperback Punk, and I'm gonna do my first book tag video. So this is actually my mid-year freakout book tag, and I think there's like 12 or 13 questions, and I'm gonna answer them and talk about books, which I'm pretty excited because in today's video I do get to talk about my favorite book that I've read this year, and yeah, I'm pretty stoked. So I'm gonna get into these questions. Okay, the first question is the best book that I have read so far. So I am so excited because it is The Sunken Motel by Simone St. James. This is the coolest book that I have read so far. I think this year I've read, well, I think I can't answer that because I think it's one of the questions, but I'll tell you. But I've read a decent amount of books this year, and I finished this so fast. I could not help but fall in love with the characters. They're gonna come up a couple times during this question list, so I highly suggest checking this book out. This is a book, it takes place in 1982 and also 2017. In 1982, a girl just goes missing. She works at this hotel on the late night shift, and one night she just goes missing and no one's ever seen her again. And flash forward to 35 years or whatever, and it's 2017, and her, I think it's her niece? I don't know. I think it's her niece, ends up moving to the same town, and she starts to do this little like investigative thing to try to find her. And it's told basically like year after year down the story, and it's just really incredible, and the character development and writing in this was so good. So I was a huge fan of The Sunken Motel, and I highly suggest you guys check it out. Okay, the next question is the best sequel that I've read this year. I'm gonna change the question because I'm gonna make it the best prequel that I've read this year, and I'm going with The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Now, I've seen some very interesting reviews about this book. Some are extremely positive, others are 1 star completely negative. I think it's all about going into a book with expectations, and I loved the Hunger Games trilogy. Those 3 books were so good. I read them in less than a week. I just could not get over how amazing Katniss was. I was a huge fan of her character and everything she went through, and she's just really a total badass. But I did buy this book, and when I found out it was about Snow, I was put off a little bit because, like, you know, Snow's not mentioned a ton in the trilogy, but we know that he's behind all of the madness that's going on, all of the chaos. And I'm a big fan of sort of like origin stories. So to me, I am a fan of, like, you know, the Joker and things like that. I like to hear about sort of what happened or what changed to lead them down the path that they chose. So if you go into this book with that mindset, I think that it actually ends up serving as a pretty cool book. I didn't expect to ever like Snow, and there are moments in here where he really is battling with his identity and battling with sort of like his destiny, but who he actually wants to be. My favorite thing, though, are actually the supporting characters in this book. I tend to like them a lot more, especially his love interest in this book. I'm actually a total fan of. She is super badass. There are a couple like Easter eggs in here that are kind of plugged in. They do seem a little bit forced, I'll give it that. And I didn't like the end of the book. Like, the book kind of just like stopped, and then it just like gave us a little like epilogue talking about what happened, and I didn't really love that part. But I finished this book really quickly. I couldn't put it down. I've heard some people say that it was boring to them, and I don't know, I never felt that way. There's only one part in this book that slumps, and it only lasts like maybe a chapter. So I highly suggest, if you enjoyed the original trilogy, you should check this out. I will say that don't expect it to be like the original trilogy. Obviously, it's not going to be better than those books, but it does serve a purpose, and I actually think it's pretty fun. So it was my favorite prequel of the year. Okay, so the next question is my favorite new release that I haven't read yet, but I want to. So I actually picked 2 of them. Ninth House, I've seen this talked about everywhere. It had some good reviews on the back from like Stephen King, who I'm a pretty big fan of now. And I don't even know what this is about. I know it's fantasy, but I know there are some horror aspects and mystery to it. So I'm really excited to check it out. I hope that it's super good, and I hope that we see more books from it. Like I said, I've seen a lot of great reviews. Let me know if you guys want to hear my thoughts on it when I finally read it. The next one is, I'm a big fan of Megan Miranda. You guys know that. I've talked about her on my channel in the past. The Girl from Widow Hills. I actually bought this the day it came out. I was at Barnes & Noble, and they didn't have it out yet. So I had to like ask them to grab it from the back, just because I'm so excited to check this out. I really enjoyed The Last House Guest. I really enjoyed All the Missing Girls, and I like her writing style. She's very intelligent. She's like an MIT graduate. And you can feel that in her writing, so you really do get submerged into the story and the character development. So I'm really excited to check this out. I think this one might be a little bit more scary than the other ones, and that'll be fun. My most anticipated release for this year, actually, I just signed up for Book of the Month, and they're shipping it to me. I think it's called The Shadows. The same guy who did The Whisper Man. I was a huge fan of The Whisper Man. There were a couple parts I didn't love, but overall I really loved the story. And so his second novel is coming out, and I think it's called The Shadows. And I'm a fan. My July box shipped from Book of the Month, so I hope it gets here any day now. Not like I don't have a million books to read, but that's just one that I've really put high on my list of things I want to check out. Okay, the next question is the biggest disappointment. And I don't know if this is supposed to be a new release, but this is just a book that I read this year that was hyped up a lot, and I did not like it, and that was In a Dark, Dark Wood. I actually read this in one day. I read it with pretty much in one sitting. Because I thought it was going to be a horror book, and all the marketing suggests it's a horror book. The whole setup of the plot feels like it's going to be a horror book. There's a lot of really great elements that could have happened, and I read the entire thing getting to that point, and it was never scary. This book ends up being a suspense thriller mystery, sort of, and I figured it out. Well, I figured out who the bad character was going to be right away, and that's one thing that I think is off-putting about this book. I originally gave it 2 stars because I was so upset when I finished reading it that it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, but I did go back and edit it to 3 stars because the story is interesting. I just feel like they tried, Ruth Ware tried to use this overlooming darkness to try to create this book to make it darker than it really was. A murder happens in a house during a hen, which here in America we just call a bachelorette party. And yeah, I mean, I'm not going to tell you much more. I mean, it's definitely worth a read. Just don't go into it expecting it to be some crazy dark thing because it doesn't happen. I was extremely disappointed by this book. Okay, so the next question is my biggest surprise. So I'm actually going to have to pick the first book that I read. It was actually scary. It actually hooked me on reading. And now all I do is read, and that is Dan Sean's Ill Will. I feel like I have become a Dan Sean Ill Will stan account because I talk about this book in every video, but I highly encourage you to check it out. It's a very different form of writing. He writes with very abrupt sentence endings, weird paragraph structures, weird page structures, but I'm not gonna lie, this book was nuts, and I think it's hard to start with a book this great because I'm consistently trying to find other books that compare to it. And while I have found a couple great ones, it's really hard to get this again. So I highly suggest reading this one if you have not already because I feel like it's a book I'm going to continue to be talking about on this channel. Okay, so the next question is my newest fictional crush, and I have to give it to Carly in the Sunken Motel. From the minute they introduced her character, I was a huge fan of her. Just the amount of effort she was putting into trying to solve a case that had gone cold for 35 years. A lot of the personality traits of her, a lot of her responses, her sarcasm, just everything about her was just so likable. And there were moments when I was like vocally expressing how excited I was as I was reading because I just like this character so much and I was really interested to see more and more from her. And my newest favorite character also goes to Viv in the Sunken Motel. Viv exists in the 1982 version of this story, whereas Carly is in the 2017 version. And Viv is just so likable, and the things that she's willing to go through in this book to protect what's going on, I don't want to give it away because it's such a good story, and the way that it unfolds is just amazing, but those 2 characters are so high on my list now. Okay, the next question was a book that made you cry, and I have not cried during any of these books, I will give myself that, but I wanted to pick an emotion, grief maybe, unrest, unsettling, and that is Pet Sematary. I get treatment for depression. One of the reasons that I do is because I'm terrified of death, just the thought of dying, coping with people dying, things like that. I struggle with that a lot, and it's one of my triggers for depression and my anxiety. Didn't really think about that when I started reading this book, and I will say that there should be a trigger warning for this when it comes to that. However, I was able to get through it just fine. I read this book really fast, actually, and I gotta say, man, there's some moments in this when Lewis, the dad, is struggling with moments going on with death that's going on around him, and some of the things he's willing to do to try to cope with that grief and those grieving around him are extremely unsettling. And I know a lot of people have probably seen the movie. I don't think I've ever seen the movie, but reading the book, I might have saw the movie when I was like a little kid. Reading the book was just fucking amazing, especially parts of this I listened to on audiobook while I was building my new record shelf, and Michael C. Hall, who was Dexter, actually narrates it, and that alone added to that creepy element. So highly suggest Pet Sematary. Obviously it's a classic. Okay, so the next question is the most beautiful book that I've read this year that I've picked up. I'm assuming it's going by aesthetics and the way the book looks. So I have not read this yet, but this is House of Leaves. It's listed like as one of the best horror books, one of the best suspense books. There's all kinds of crazy shit goes on in this book, and I haven't read it yet, but it really is beautiful, and I cannot wait to dive into this. I hear like you have to pay so much attention to every aspect of this book to really get it. I don't even know what the book's about, but it is a really pretty book. Okay, so even though recently I bought about 30 books, this next question is what books I want to read by the end of the year. And I didn't want to just sit here and list off 30 books, so I grabbed a stack of books that I bought recently that I'm trying to read this year. And the first one is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. I've not read this book, but someone on Twitter actually recommended it, so I bought it. I don't know what to expect out of this. I know that you basically know your death date, and so they like meet each other and they both know they're gonna die. So it might be sad, might be another trigger for my anxiety, but I'm actually really excited to check it out. The Girl on the Train. I'm sure you guys have seen the movie by now or read the book. I've never read this book, so I bought it because I heard it's amazing. Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I went to an independent bookstore in Chicago, and they were raving about this book, so I purchased it on the spot. I heard it's really, really great, and you definitely leave with some interesting thoughts, so I'm excited to get into that. Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. This was actually recommended to me by one of the ladies that worked at the Barnes & Noble, said that every book by her just is a really great mystery, and they're well written, so I'm excited to get into this and dive even further into her books. I'm running out of space over here. Daisy Jones and the Six, recommended by one of my YouTube subscribers. I've been looking for this book ever since they recommended it, and I finally found it, so I picked it up, and I'm excited to read it. I'm going to read Doctor Sleep. It's got mixed reviews. I know that. And I want to read it because I love The Shining, so I'd love to see what the sequel looks like from Stephen King so many years later. I did not see the book, or I did not see the movie, so I am excited to read the book and then see the movie. I'm running out of room over here. Lisa Jules, The Family Upstairs, another book that I am super excited to check out. It's just another mystery. I love that genre. That's probably my favorite genre, is like suspense, mystery, thriller, and horror. I'll read other stuff, but I do love those genres a lot, so I'm excited to check that one out. The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Someone in my comment section actually recommended this book as well, so I made sure to pick it up. It looks like a good read. It's kind of big. And I was reading the synopsis of it. Apparently, this girl is going to die, and her Aiden Bishop can identify her killer, but he comes back as like someone else at the party every single day. So that sounds super fun, and there's probably a lot of little twists in there. Mindhunter, which is my favorite Netflix show. It's about the behavioral unit of the FBI. They essentially they create the profiles for shows like Criminal Minds, where they were interviewing serial killers to try to figure out what was going on in their lives, in their body, in their brain that was making them feel these impulses to murder. And it's like the intelligence IQ level is insane. And I found out that the show is actually based on this book. So I want to read this, especially since the show on Netflix is actually like on pause right now. So it'd be really awesome to get more in depth in that. The last one I'm excited about is The Silent Patient. I picked this up a couple weeks ago, and I don't even know what it's about, but it was like listed as like one of the best books that are out right now. So I'm really excited to check this one out as well. So as you see, I have so many books to read, but it's only the middle of the year, and I feel like I've been reading a lot of books lately anyways, so I don't think it's going to be too difficult. But I hope some of you guys are stoked to see some of your recommendations in that list, because I'm listening to you. I mean, as a new reader, it's like one thing for me to like Google best horror book, best this book, best that, but it's another thing to hear word of mouth. And I do have Goodreads. I don't actually look at Goodreads for recommendations. I just like to keep a log of my progress on what I'm reading and what I want to read. So I know some people are probably like, oh, there's stuff better than Goodreads. There probably is, but I just do it to track my progress. I like to know where I'm at, what I've read. It kind of keeps me motivated to read more. But I hope you guys like the mid-year Freakout tag. It's my first book tag. And yeah, you guys can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Very active over there. Of course, you guys can follow my main Instagram and Twitter, Positive Steven. And yeah, let's talk about books. I've been posting a lot more on all of my socials lately. So I hope you guys like this content. Make sure to like and subscribe and follow me on my book journey. I'll be dropping some paperback punk merch in the near future. I want to make some cool like punk rock themed reading shirts. So if you guys are interested in that, make sure to stick around. But hope you guys had a great time here, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.